The red lace bra wasn't Jessica's size. I knew because I'd been buying her underwear for 15 years, and my wife was a solid 34C. This little number screaming at me from our dryer was definitely a 32B. Someone smaller, someone younger, someone who'd been in my house, in my bed, wearing nothing but lies. My name is Evan Baker, and I'm a forensic accountant. That means I find things people don't want found. Numbers that don't add up, money that disappears, patterns that reveal secrets. It's funny how those skills translate to marriage when your wife starts acting like a corporation hiding assets. Honey, did you shrink in the wash? I called out, holding up the evidence. Jessica appeared in the doorway, hair still damp from her shower, wearing that guilty expression I'd been seeing more often lately. Oh, that's Melinda's. She left it after our girls' night last week. Melinda was Jessica's best friend and had been a 36D since high school. The woman could barely fit into a beach towel, let alone this scrap of red silk. Right, I said, folding it carefully. I'll make sure she gets it back. Jessica's face went pale. We both knew Melinda lived across town and hadn't been to our house in months. But Jessica just nodded and disappeared back into the bathroom. That's when I knew for certain my marriage was over. Not because of the bra, but because my wife had stopped caring enough to lie convincingly. The signs had been building for months. Late nights at the office, mysterious phone calls that ended when I walked into the room, new lingerie that never made appearances in our bedroom. Jessica had always been ambitious, but lately she'd been practically glowing with a confidence that had nothing to do with her job performance and everything to do with someone telling her she was beautiful. That someone, I was pretty sure, was Richard Vaughn. Rick to his friends, CEO to everyone else. The kind of man who wore $1,000 suits and drove a black Range Rover with vanity plates reading Top Dog. He was Jessica's boss, her mentor, and apparently her ticket to a life that didn't include me. I'd met Rick exactly 3 times. Once at Jessica's company Christmas party, where he'd looked through me like I was furniture. Once at a charity golf tournament, where he'd made jokes about number crunchers, while Jessica laughed a little too hard. And once at their company picnic, where I'd watched him put his hand on the small of my wife's back while she introduced him to our 12-year-old daughter Maya. That last time, I'd wanted to break his fingers. Maya was the only good thing left in my marriage. Smart as a whip, funny in that brutal way only kids can be, and completely unimpressed by her mother's newfound obsession with status and success. She'd inherited my sarcasm and Jessica's ambition, which made her dangerous in the best possible way. Dad, why does Mom keep checking her phone during dinner? Maya had asked me the week before, cutting straight to the heart of things like she always did. Maybe she's playing Candy Crush, I'd said, which made Maya roll her eyes. Mom doesn't play games, Dad. She's texting someone. Someone who makes her smile like she used to smile at you. Out of the mouths of babes. I spent that evening going through Jessica's things with the methodical precision I usually reserved for financial audits. Her purse yielded a hotel key card from the Marriott downtown. Her laptop history showed searches for how to tell your husband you want a divorce, and starting over at 36. Her jewelry box contained a pair of diamond earrings I'd never seen before. Expensive ones that definitely didn't come from my forensic accountant salary. But it was the text message that finally broke me. Jessica had left her phone charging in the kitchen while she took a shower. The screen lit up with a notification, and there it was, bold and shameless. Last night was incredible. Wear the red tonight. I want to unwrap you again, R. I stared at that message for a long time, feeling something cold and hard settle in my chest. Not heartbreak exactly, more like the satisfaction of finally solving a puzzle that had been bothering me for months. All the pieces clicked into place with an almost audible snap. My wife was having an affair with her boss. She was planning to leave me, and she was stupid enough to think I wouldn't figure it out. That was her first mistake. The company gala was held at the Grand Ballroom downtown, the kind of place where they charge $50 for a martini and everyone pretends it's worth it. Jessica had insisted I attend, which should have been my second clue something was wrong. She usually preferred to keep her work life and home life completely separate, especially when it came to events where she could network with important people. It's important that you're there, she'd said, adjusting my tie with hands that smelled like expensive perfume. Rick specifically asked about you. I'll bet he did. The ballroom was packed with Jessica's colleagues, all of them dressed like they were auditioning for a role in a movie about successful people. The men wore suits that cost more than my car payment, and the women sparkled with jewelry that could fund a small country. I felt like a janitor at a yacht club, which was probably the point. Jessica disappeared almost immediately, claiming she needed to work the room. I watched her glide from group to group, laughing at jokes that weren't funny and touching arms that didn't need touching. She was in her element, and I was clearly not part of that element. "Evan, there you are!" Rick Vaughn materialized beside me like a bad rash, all white teeth and expensive cologne. He was shorter than I'd remembered, which was somehow disappointing. I'd been hoping to hate someone more physically impressive. "Rick," I said, shaking his hand and noting the Rolex that probably cost more than my annual salary. "Nice party." "Only the best for our team," Rick said, his eyes already scanning the room for more important people to talk to. "Jessica's been absolutely invaluable this quarter. I don't know what I'd do without her." The way he said invaluable made my skin crawl, like he was tasting the word, rolling it around in his mouth before swallowing it whole. "She's certainly been putting in long hours," I said carefully. "Oh, you know how it is in this business. Success requires sacrifice. Late nights, weekend meetings, business trips." Rick's smile was sharp enough to cut glass. "Of course, not everyone understands that level of commitment." Num. There it was, the dig I'd been waiting for. Rick wasn't just sleeping with my wife, he was making sure I knew it. He wanted me to feel small, insignificant, like an obstacle to be removed, rather than a person to be respected. Num. I understand commitment, I said, pulling out my phone and pretending to check messages. "I'm actually recording this conversation, for posterity." Rick's smile faltered for just a moment, but he recovered quickly. "Recording? How thorough of you. Occupational hazard. I'm in the business of documentation." I slipped the phone back into my pocket, making sure the record button stayed on. "You'd be amazed what people reveal when they think no one's paying attention." Before Rick could respond, Jessica appeared at his elbow like a heat-seeking missile. She was flushed and slightly breathless, as if she'd hurried over to prevent exactly this kind of conversation. "There you are," she said brightly, taking Rick's arm in a way that was definitely not professional. "I've been looking everywhere for you." "Just getting to know your husband better," Rick said, his eyes never leaving mine. "He's interesting." "Evan's full of surprises," Jessica said, and I couldn't tell if that was a warning or a threat. I excused myself and spent the next hour wandering the ballroom, nursing a beer and listening to conversations that revealed more than their speakers intended. Corporate events are gold mines for someone in my line of work. People drink too much, gossip too freely, and forget that walls have ears. That's how I learned that Rick had a reputation for mentoring young female employees, that Jessica wasn't his first married conquest, that there were rumors about shell companies and questionable expense reports, that the board of directors was starting to ask uncomfortable questions about Rick's management style. And that's how I learned that Jessica and Rick were planning to disappear together during the party. I followed them at a distance, watching as they slipped away from the main ballroom and into a service corridor that led to the hotel's administrative offices. They were so focused on each other that they never noticed me trailing behind, phone in hand, finger hovering over the record button. The conversation I captured was better than I could have hoped for. "You said you'd tell him tonight," Rick's voice, sharp with irritation. "I need more time. Maya's still adjusting to the idea of us being together." Jessica's voice, pleading and desperate in a way I hadn't heard in years. "I'm not waiting forever, Jess. Either you're in this or you're not. But I won't be anyone's dirty secret much longer." "You're not a secret. You're complicated." "Complicated?" Rick laughed, and it wasn't a pleasant sound. "Honey, I'm the best thing that ever happened to you. Your husband's a nobody, a paper pusher who couldn't afford to take you to a place like this if he saved for 10 years. Don't talk about Evan that way." "Why not? It's true." "Face it, Jess. You've outgrown your little suburban life. You deserve better. You deserve me." There was a long pause, filled with sounds I didn't want to identify. Then Jessica's voice, smaller now. "What about Maya? What about her? Kids adapt. She'll understand eventually." "And if she doesn't?" Another pause. When Rick spoke again, his voice was cold. "Then she'll learn to. I'm not going to let a 12-year-old dictate my future, or yours." That's when I stopped recording and started planning. Rick Vaughn had just made his second mistake. The first was sleeping with my wife. The second was threatening my daughter. Now it was personal. I spent the next 3 days doing what I do best, following the money. Rick's expense reports were a thing of beauty, if you appreciated creative accounting and had a high tolerance for fraud. Business dinners that cost more than most people's rent, hotel stays in cities where the company had no business interests, consulting fees paid to shell companies that existed only on paper. Jessica's signature was on half of them. My wife wasn't just having an affair. She was helping Rick embezzle from her own company. Whether she knew it or not was irrelevant. Her name was on the documents, which made her just as guilty in the eyes of the law. I made copies of everything and stored them in 3 different locations. Then I did something that felt both petty and deeply satisfying. I started messing with Rick's life in small, annoying ways. It began with his precious Range Rover. Every morning, Rick parked in the same executive spot outside his gym, a place called Elite Fitness that catered to men who needed to prove their worth with expensive equipment and designer workout clothes. The parking lot had security cameras, but they were focused on the building entrance, not the individual parking spaces. I loosened the lug nuts on his rear wheels, not enough to cause an accident, but enough to make the car wobble at high speeds. Then I slipped a cheater bumper sticker under his rear windshield wiper, positioned so he wouldn't see it until someone else pointed it out. Finally, I poured fish sauce into his air conditioning intake, guaranteeing that his next drive would be memorable for all the wrong reasons. The results exceeded my expectations. Rick's car started wobbling on the highway, forcing him to pull over in front of the gym, just as the morning crowd was arriving. When he got out to investigate, someone noticed the bumper sticker and started taking pictures. By the time Rick realized what was happening, half the gym members were recording videos of the CEO of Jessica's company standing next to a car that labeled him a cheater while reeking of rotting fish. The videos were online within an hour, but that was just the warm-up act. My real target was Rick's office, a corner suite on the 15th floor of downtown's most prestigious business tower. Getting inside required patience, observation, and a willingness to exploit human nature's most predictable weakness, the desire to be helpful. I waited until lunch hour, then approached the building wearing a delivery uniform and carrying a clipboard. The security guard barely looked up as I signed in as Dave from IT support and headed for the elevators. People see what they expect to see, and nobody questions a man in uniform carrying official-looking paperwork. Rick's office was everything I'd expected: leather furniture, expensive art, and a wall of awards celebrating his various achievements in the field of being Rick Vaughn. His desk was the size of a small aircraft carrier, dominated by a computer monitor and a golf trophy engraved with Champion 2019 Executive Tournament. I replaced the trophy with one I'd had made at a local engraving shop. Same size, same weight, but with a different inscription: World's Biggest Asshole, 2023 Executive Tournament. Then I opened his desk drawers and placed a dead fish I'd bought at the market inside the bottom one, wrapped in plastic, but with several small holes poked through. The fish would take a few days to ripen, but when it did, Rick's office would become uninhabitable. I was photographing some interesting documents I'd found in his filing cabinet when I heard voices in the hallway. Rick was returning early from lunch, and he wasn't alone. I could hear Jessica's voice, along with someone else I didn't recognize. There was nowhere to hide except behind the heavy curtains that covered the floor-to-ceiling windows. I pressed myself against the glass and tried not to breathe as the office door opened. Told you the board was asking questions, Jessica was saying. Maybe we should slow down, be more careful. The board can ask all the questions they want, Rick replied. By the time they figure out what's happening, we'll be long gone. Gone where? The third voice belonged to a man I didn't recognize, older and more cautious than Rick. Cayman Islands, initially. Then maybe Switzerland. I've got accounts set up, properties purchased, everything's ready. And the money? Transferred gradually over the past 6 months. Small amounts, different accounts, nothing traceable. By my calculations, we've moved about 2.3 million so far. Jessica gasped. 2.3 million? Rick, I thought we were talking about a few 100,000. Relax, sweetheart. It's not like they're going to miss it. This company makes that much in a week. But if we get caught, we won't get caught. And even if we do, you're clean. All the transfers were authorized by me. Your signature just makes it look legitimate. I was recording everything, of course. My phone was in my pocket, capturing every word of their confession. But I was also thinking about Jessica, about the woman I'd married 15 years ago, who would never have participated in something like this. Either she'd changed more than I'd realized, or Rick was manipulating her in ways she didn't understand. Either way, she was in serious trouble. The conversation continued for another 10 minutes, covering details about offshore accounts, forged documents, and exit strategies. When they finally left, I waited another 15 minutes before emerging from my hiding spot. I now had enough evidence to destroy Rick Vaughn and probably send him to prison. The question was whether I wanted to take Jessica down with him. That decision would have to wait. First, I had a golf trophy to admire. Maya was the one who told me about the school meeting. Mom's picking me up early on Friday, she said over breakfast, not looking up from her cereal. Some kind of parent conference thing. Jessica, who was standing at the counter checking her phone, didn't react, which meant she hadn't told Maya the truth about where they were going. What kind of conference? I asked. I don't know. Mom just said it was important. Maya finally looked up, and I could see the worry in her eyes. Dad, are you and Mom getting divorced? The question hit me like a punch to the stomach. Jessica's phone clattered to the counter, and for a moment the kitchen was completely silent. Why would you ask that? Jessica said finally. Because you never talk to each other anymore. And Mom, you're always texting someone who isn't Dad, and Dad looks sad all the time, even when he's trying to be funny. And out of the mouths of babes, again. I looked at Jessica, waiting to see how she'd handle this. She was staring at Maya with an expression I couldn't read, something between guilt and panic. Your father and I are working through some things, Jessica said carefully. But whatever happens, we both love you very much. It wasn't an answer, and Maya was smart enough to know it. She finished her cereal in silence, kissed me goodbye, and left for school with shoulders that seemed too small to carry the weight of her parents' failing marriage. After Maya left, Jessica and I stood in the kitchen, avoiding eye contact like teenagers after a fight. We need to talk, I said finally. I'm late for work. Jessica, we need to talk. She looked at me then, really looked at me, and I saw something I hadn't seen in months. The woman I'd married. Scared, vulnerable, and trapped in a situation that had spiraled beyond her control. Not now, Evan. Please, I need more time. Time for what? To figure out how to tell me you're leaving? To pack up our daughter and move her across the country? To help your boyfriend steal enough money to fund your new life? Jessica's face went white. What are you talking about? I pulled out my phone and played back 30 seconds of the recording I'd made in Rick's office. Jessica's voice filled the kitchen, discussing offshore accounts and exit strategies with the casual tone of someone ordering coffee. When it finished, Jessica sank into a chair like her legs had given out. How long have you known? She whispered. About the affair? Months. About the embezzlement? 3 days. It's not what you think. It's exactly what I think. You're sleeping with your boss and helping him steal from your company. The only question is whether you're doing it willingly or whether he's manipulating you. Jessica was crying now, quiet tears that made her look younger and more fragile than she had in years. I never meant for any of this to happen, she said. It started so small. Rick would ask me to sign papers, authorize transfers, approve expenses. He said it was normal, that all executives did it. And then you were in too deep to get out. She nodded. He has evidence of everything I signed. If this comes out, I'll go to prison. Maya will lose both her parents. Not if we handle this right. Jessica looked up at me with something that might have been hope. What do you mean? I mean, Rick made a mistake when he involved you. He created a witness, someone who can testify about his methods and motivations, someone who can help the authorities understand that she was coerced. You'd do that after everything I've done? I thought about that question for a long time. Jessica had betrayed me, lied to me, and planned to leave me for another man. She'd participated in criminal activity and put our daughter's future at risk. By any reasonable standard, I should have been planning my own exit strategy. But she was also the mother of my child and the woman I'd loved for 15 years. And despite everything, I could see that she was as much a victim in this situation as anyone else. I'd do it for Maya, I said finally. But there are conditions. Anything. First, you end things with Rick. Today. Permanently. Done. Second, you cooperate fully with whatever investigation follows. You tell the truth, the whole truth, and you don't try to protect him. I understand. Third, after this is over, we get divorced. Quietly, amicably, but permanently. I'll make sure you get custody of Maya and enough support to start over somewhere safe. Jessica nodded, tears streaming down her face. What about you? I'll be fine. I'm good at starting over. It wasn't entirely true, but it wasn't entirely false either. I'd been starting over since the day I realized my marriage was ending. The only difference now was that I had a plan. And Rick Vaughn was about to discover just how thorough my plans could be. The board meeting was scheduled for Monday morning at 9 o'clock sharp. I knew because I'd been invited to attend as an independent financial consultant by Eldon Crawford, the company's board chairman and Rick's least favorite person in the corporate hierarchy. Eldon was old money, The kind of man who wore suits that cost more than most cars, but looked like he'd owned them for decades. He'd built his fortune in manufacturing back when that meant something, and he had no patience for the flashy, high-tech approach that Rick represented. "Your wife mentioned you might be able to help us with some irregularities we've discovered," Eldon had said when he called. "Apparently you have experience with forensic accounting." "Some experience," I'd agreed. "What kind of irregularities? The kind that could land people in federal prison?" The meeting was held in the company's main conference room, a glass-walled space that offered a panoramic view of the city and no privacy whatsoever. Rick was already there when I arrived, sitting at the head of the table like he owned the place, which, technically, he almost did. He looked surprised to see me, then annoyed, then worried. "Good. Evan," he said, standing to shake my hand. "I didn't realize you'd be joining us." "Mr. Crawford asked me to review some financial documents," I said, setting my briefcase on the table. "Apparently there are some questions about expense reporting and fund transfers." Rick's smile was tight enough to crack. "I'm sure any questions can be cleared up quickly. We run a very transparent operation here." "Transparent," I repeated, savoring the word. "That's an interesting choice of terminology." Other board members filed in over the next few minutes. Janet Morrison from HR, Doug Peterson from Legal, and 3 other executives whose names I didn't bother to remember. Jessica was notably absent, which was probably for the best. Eldon called the meeting to order and got straight to the point. "We're here to discuss some financial irregularities that have come to our attention," he said, looking directly at Rick. "Specifically, a pattern of questionable expense reports and unauthorized fund transfers that appear to have been ongoing for several months." Rick leaned back in his chair, projecting confidence he clearly didn't feel. "I'm not aware of any irregularities. All of my expenses have been properly documented and approved through the normal channels." "Normal channels," I said, opening my briefcase and pulling out a thick folder. "Let's talk about what's normal." For the next 30 minutes, I walked the board through Rick's creative accounting methods, the shell companies that existed only on paper, the consulting fees paid to entities that provided no services, the hotel stays in cities where the company had no business interests, the restaurant bills that could have fed a small army. Rick tried to interrupt several times, but Eldon shut him down with the kind of authority that comes from owning a significant percentage of the company. "These are all legitimate business expenses," Rick said when I finished. "I can provide documentation for every transaction." "I'm sure you can," I said. "The question is whether that documentation will hold up under federal scrutiny." "Federal scrutiny?" Rick's voice cracked slightly. "Well, when you're talking about $2.3 million in potentially fraudulent transfers, the FBI tends to take an interest." The room went dead silent. Rick's face cycled through several colors before settling on a shade of gray that matched his expensive suit. "2.3 million?" Eldon's voice was dangerously quiet. "That's my conservative estimate," I said, pulling out another folder. "Based on the documents I've reviewed, Mr. Vaughn has been systematically transferring company funds to offshore accounts for at least 6 months. The transfers were disguised as legitimate business expenses and authorized using forged signatures and falsified documentation." "That's impossible," Rick said, but his voice lacked conviction. "All transfers were properly authorized. Jessica Baker signed off on every transaction." "Ah, yes, Jessica," I smiled at Rick, and it wasn't a pleasant expression. "Let's talk about Jessica." I played the recording I'd made in Rick's office, the one where he bragged about manipulating Jessica into signing documents she didn't understand. The one where he discussed his exit strategy and his plans to leave her holding the bag if things went wrong. When the recording finished, the silence in the room was absolute. "You son of a bitch," Janet Morrison said finally. "You were setting her up." Rick was sweating now, beads of perspiration visible on his forehead despite the air conditioning. "That recording was made illegally. It can't be used as evidence." "You're right," I said. "It can't be used in court, but it can be used by this board to make personnel decisions." Eldon stood up, his face carved from stone. "Richard Vaughn, you are hereby terminated from your position as CEO of this company, effective immediately. Security will escort you from the building, and you are not to return under any circumstances." "You can't do this," Rick said, standing as well. "I have contracts, severance agreements." "You have nothing," Eldon said. "Your employment contract includes a morality clause and a provision for immediate termination in cases of criminal activity. Both apply here." 2 security guards appeared in the doorway, as if summoned by magic. They were large, professional, and completely unsympathetic to Rick's protests as they escorted him from the room. As the door closed behind them, Eldon turned to me. "What about Jessica?" "Jessica was a victim," I said. "She was manipulated into signing documents she didn't understand by someone in a position of authority. She's prepared to cooperate fully with any investigation and to testify against Mr. Vaughn if necessary." "And you? What do you get out of this?" I thought about that question for a moment. What did I get? My wife back? My marriage? My old life? No, those things were gone, and no amount of revenge could bring them back. "I get to know that my daughter won't grow up thinking her father was too weak to fight back," I said finally. Eldon nodded slowly. "That's worth something." "Yes," I said, packing up my files. "It is." The news broke on a Wednesday morning. "Local CEO arrested in embezzlement scheme," read the headline in the business section, accompanied by a photograph of Rick being led away in handcuffs. The article mentioned an unnamed co-conspirator who was cooperating with authorities, but Jessica's name was kept out of the press. I was drinking coffee and reading the story when Maya came downstairs for breakfast. "Is that Mom's boss?" she asked, looking at Rick's picture. "Former boss," I said. "He got fired." "Good. I never liked him." "Why not?" Maya poured herself a bowl of cereal and sat down across from me. "He looked at Mom the way Tommy Peterson looks at the cookies in the cafeteria, like he wanted to eat her up. Sometimes my daughter's insights were terrifying." Jessica came down a few minutes later, looking like she hadn't slept in days, which, knowing Jessica, she probably hadn't. She'd been meeting with lawyers and federal agents for the past week, telling her story over and over until it became a rehearsed recitation of facts and dates. "How are you holding up?" I asked. "I'm tired," she said, pouring herself coffee with hands that shook slightly. "But my lawyer thinks the prosecutor will accept a plea agreement. Community service, restitution, probation, no jail time." "That's good." "Is it? I still destroyed our marriage. I still betrayed you and put Maya at risk. I still made the stupidest decisions of my life." Maya looked up from her cereal. "Mom, are you and Dad getting divorced?" Jessica and I exchanged glances. We'd been avoiding this conversation for weeks, but Maya deserved the truth. "Yes," Jessica said quietly, "we are." "Because of your boss?" "Because of choices I made. Bad choices." Maya nodded solemnly, processing this information with the seriousness of a Supreme Court justice. "Will I still get to see both of you?" "Of course," I said. "We're getting divorced, but we're still your parents. That never changes. And we'll still love you just as much," Jessica added. "Both of us." Maya finished her cereal and stood up. "Okay, but I want to live with Dad." The words hit Jessica like a physical blow. She actually stepped backward, her face crumpling with pain and surprise. "Maya," she started. "I'm sorry, Mom. I love you, but I'm mad at you right now. Maybe I won't be mad forever, but I am now. And Dad didn't do anything wrong except trust you." Maya kissed my cheek, grabbed her backpack, and headed for the door. "I'll see you after school, Dad." And after she left, Jessica sank into a chair and started crying. Not the quiet, dignified tears she'd been shedding for weeks, but the ugly, broken sobs of someone whose world had completely collapsed. I wanted to comfort her. Despite everything, I wanted to put my arms around her and tell her it would be okay. But I couldn't. Too much had happened. Too much trust had been broken. Instead, I sat across from her and waited for the storm to pass. "She hates me," Jessica said finally. "She's 12. She doesn't understand the complexities of adult relationships. She just knows that her family is broken and she needs someone to blame. She's right to blame me. Maybe, but she's also right to forgive you eventually. Kids are resilient that way." Jessica looked at me with red-rimmed eyes. "How are you so calm about all of this? I destroyed everything we built together, and you're acting like it's just business." "Maybe because it feels like business now. We're dissolving a partnership that stopped working. It's painful, but it's not personal anymore." "Not personal? Evan, I cheated on you. I lied to you. I participated in criminal activity. How is that not personal?" I thought about that question for a long time. How do you explain that betrayal, once it reaches a certain level, becomes almost abstract? That the person who could hurt you that badly stops being someone you love and becomes someone you used to know. "Because the woman I married wouldn't have done those things," I said finally. "So either you changed, or I never really knew you in the first place. Either way, the Jessica I fell in love with 15 years ago doesn't exist anymore." "That's the cruelest thing you've ever said to me." "Maybe, but it's also the truest." Jessica stood up, wiping her eyes with the back of her hand. I should pack some things. I'm staying with Melinda until I can find my own place. Take your time. The house is paid off, and Maya needs stability. You can stay as long as you need to. I can't stay here, Evan. Not with you being so reasonable. I need you to be angry with me. I need you to yell and throw things and act like a normal person whose wife just blew up their life. Whoa, sorry to disappoint you. Jessica grabbed her purse and headed for the door, then stopped and turned back. For what it's worth, I am sorry. Sorrier than you'll ever know. I know, I said. But sorry doesn't fix anything. It just makes